And good morning, everyone. My name is Vikas Pota. I'm the founder and CEO of T4, and we use these opportunities to bring forward friends and topics that we think are quite important to the world of education. And so in the past, we've spoken to world leaders, including presidents, prime ministers, as well as ministers of education and other friends right from schools and teachers from all around the world who have come and actually shared their experiences with us. Today, we speak about a very important topic, which all of us in education are rightly and should be interested in. And I introduce it by way of saying that, as a child when I was growing up, I hated tests. I hated examinations. And when the pandemic struck, I remember my daughter, who was sitting for her GCSEs that children give at the age of 16 in the UK, when they were told that exams had been cancelled, there was sheer jubilation. And so when you think about, this meta theme about assessments in particular, I wanted to bring some insight and some research in front of us. And that's why I'm really delighted that we have an amazing speaker with us today who will share some new research with us and allow us to interact on this topic. So please welcome Sam Fraser, the Director of Research for ISC Research. Sam, welcome. Welcome to this.
Hi, Vikas.
It's a pleasure seeing you. Do you want to say a bit about what ISC Research does?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're a data and market intelligence company. We've been around in the market for close to 26 years now, I think.
Wow.
Based in Oxford, well, just on the outskirts of Oxford in the UK. Our focus is really purely on international schools. So globally, we focus on the international schools market, and we would describe ourselves as being the key player in that industry in terms of the collection of all things market intelligence and data.
And so before we go any further, I also want to tell those that or share with those that are watching that, especially on Facebook, that we would love to see your comments come up on the screen. But in order for us to actually see your profile pic, we need you to go to streamyard.com/Facebook and then give them consent to do that so that we can see you. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about here, where you have, for example, you have this example where someone from Serbia is saying hello, but we don't know who you are. But then you also have my friend and my colleague Obasanjo says, welcome everyone, kindly introduce yourself and where you're joining from. We want to see your name. And so go to streamyard.com and /Facebook, and you'll be able to do that. But I also want to start by welcoming others who are watching. Dheeraj Mehrotra, Marcella, who's watching on LinkedIn, Jonah, thank you for coming. Sri Srinivasan, who is a phenomenal social media and digital leader. Hello from New York. It's quite early for you, Sri. Thanks for joining. And your own colleagues on ISC Research. We're looking forward to today's event. Fantastic. We have Kalyani from India, who is a country ambassador for us. And so it goes. And, and of course, I can't forget our chief watching from Leeds, UK. Kirsten, hello. Thanks for joining in. Mais, hi. Hello to all. Now, Karen Dudley works at the Western Cape Education Department in South Africa. Hi, Karen. Thanks for joining in. I really appreciate this. And you got Alex in the UK from Numberella, which is a great name for a business, by the way. Reminds me of a song. You and I have talked about that, Alex. And of course, Nurpur from Turkey. So thank you all for joining. You can see, Sam, we have a huge amount of people joining and talking about this.
Absolutely.
What I want to kick off with are just a series of questions that enter my mind when it comes to this topic, right? And when I think about assessments, and we're talking about the future of assessments today, one of the things that I think we need to do at the beginning, at the outset, is to establish some definitions, because they can mean different things in different places. And as you've seen, the diversity of those that are joining today's call seminar, I think they'll benefit from this. So, as a first off, can you explain to those that are participating the difference between formative and summative assessments?
Yeah, so absolutely, Vikas. So to put it in a nutshell, effectively, if we're looking at formative, it's to evaluate how someone is learning throughout the process of a course. So that could be through quizzes, through conversations in the classroom, feedback or what have you. Summative is largely more like at the end of a course to see what you physically learned throughout the process. So it's either during or summative at the end. Either can be through quizzes and tests and what have you.
So the question that really flows from that for me actually is, what's more important in your opinion?
Well, that's the age-old question, Vikas, isn't it?
The reason I ask you, sorry, Sam, is that when in the Teacher Tech Summit that we've got coming up, we actually have a meta theme on test prep in India, and in particular, it's also referred to as high stakes testing.
Sure.
What is your opinion on this?
Well, I think formative is gaining a lot of traction post-COVID. I think a lot of schools are looking at focusing more on the formative side of things. Personally, you're asking me the question, so I'll give you my opinion. I think we should be looking at diagnostic. I think we should be looking at formative and summative in order to analyze as a whole picture how a student learns and pick up on all of those pieces to map out exactly what a student's life cycle of learning is like. So from my point of view, I think formative and summative are important, but a lot of schools at the moment are focusing more heavily on the formative side of things.
And so given that, how do you answer this question?
Are grades the best way forward? Well, it's an interesting question. I think a lot of people may say that summative assessments are perhaps fairer ways to assess, and we touch upon this in our report, which we're going to be running through in a minute. But I think the way questions are phrased and structured could lean towards some students' skill sets rather than others. And also, I think if you look at grades and focused on summative exams, for example, is that truly reflective of the working environment and the way we approach work, rather than perhaps going through a process of another policy, another way of moving forward. So I think personally, from my perspective, a lot of people would say it's the fairest, but I think in today's world where we carry around in our pocket a memory bank of all information via a mobile phone, I think that perhaps going into an exam and not being allowed to research is perhaps not quite in line with where we are in the working environment these days.
Thanks for sharing that, Sam. And before we go on to your presentation, which you've very kindly put together, I also want to say that ISC has created a toolkit for teachers, including the report that Sam is going to kind of feature in a second, which also has more resources. So you can go to iscforschools.com/T4, and you can take a look at the report there. And one of the other things that we'd love for you to do is, given their leadership in the sector, where you can also follow ISC Research on Facebook. So the address is here, facebook.com/we-are-ISC Research, and I'd be grateful if you can all go and actually sign up to their Facebook page, so that you can also keep in touch with all of the different reports that they publish, which I find very informative, and you may also enjoy. So before, Sam, we go into your presentation, I just want to take some more comments. And what I want to say to all the viewers and those that are participating is, please do ask questions, and Sam and I will make time to take these. So for example, these are not exactly questions so far because we haven't really said anything, but I'm hoping they come. So Alejandra in Argentina is saying good morning. Atif from New Delhi is saying hello. Kavita is saying lovely to be part of it. Sandra, another country ambassador, saying hello everyone. Karen is saying hello. I don't know what your name is. I apologize. I don't know Arabic, but hello, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Espanol from Jordan is saying hi. Now, this is quite timely. Alexandra, hello from Ukraine. A big high five to you. Keep up the good work. And please know that we think about you and all educators in Ukraine today, given everything that we see happening around us. Duria from Singapore, who heads up Scholastic International. Hi, Duria. Thank you so much for joining in. It's a pleasure seeing you here. Ken. Now, my friend Ken, like, who's a teacher in Australia, was once a finalist for the Global Teacher Prize. Thanks for joining in, Ken. Zania from South Africa, hi. Now, this is what I mean. Like, if you go to streamyard.com/Facebook, we'll be able to see who you are. But thank you for watching from Oriental Mindoro in the Philippines. Thank you so much for that. And we have more participants and contributors to this discussion. But what we're interested in is questions, and so please do ask them. Now, Sam, you have a presentation to give, and so I'm going to leave you to it. So good luck, and please do, if you're watching, please do ask questions. Thank you. Here we go.
All right. So so firstly, I want to say thank you to T4 and Vikas for inviting me to discuss our recently released report, which is the future of assessment in international schools. The findings are, from our point of view, extremely insightful, and I'm pleased we can share some of the key points with you today. So I'll start by giving you some background on ISC Research. We've touched upon a bit of this already, but we've been gathering market intelligence 25 years. We track the market closely for shifts, challenges, good practice, new developments, and emerging opportunities. We process over 300,000 data points every year and spend approximately 4,500 hours on verification to ensure that, first of all, we, but also you, can trust our data. Since 1994, we've guided schools for their growth plans, informed investors on new school developments, helped universities to engage with international schools, and advised education partners that are supporting the market. A few other things we do as well. So we supply an online data platform, in-depth reports, data sets, and expertise on the international schools market. So for your information, for the purpose of data collection and analysis, school fits our definition of an international campus if the school delivers a curriculum to students at any combination of preschool, primary, and secondary, wholly or partly in English, outside an English-speaking country, or if a school is in a country where English is one of the official languages, it offers an English medium curriculum other than the country's national curriculum, and the school is internationally oriented as well. So, as we all know, the pandemic has acted as a catalyst to accelerate change in education. Assessment has arguably experienced most disruption, which is the reason really why ISC Research decided to carry out this study and write the report in the first instance. We've explored assessment trends that have emerged and discussed initiatives with international schools and education partners. Outcomes of the research are published in our latest market intelligence report, which we're already talking about, the future of assessment, which is available to purchase on our website. So that's iscresearch.com/intelligence, and you'll see the URL on the slide there. Looking at the process, we want to give you a bit of an idea of how we put this report together. So our assessment research was conducted in December 2021, so pretty recently. We openly invited school leaders, teachers, and administrators working in international schools to contribute. Research participants were invited to remain anonymous if they preferred. Obviously, not everyone did. Respondents were asked closed questions and were given opportunities to provide explanations or expand on their responses if they wished. We actually ended up having 135 people who are currently employed by international schools participate. And this slide really offers a regional breakdown for respondents who, on where those people were from, the countries they represented, and that added to 59 different countries. Most of those were in sub-regions where international schools have a decent exposure. Just to give you an update then, so the countries that we received the leading number of responses from were India, China, the UAE, Malaysia, Thailand, and Spain. So a relatively broad geographic mix. Just one last thing then. So the most respondents represented international schools serving children of all ages through 5 years old to 19 years old. Okay, so our research shows that schools are focusing on implementing formative assessment strategies over summative and diagnostic assessment, as I mentioned to Vikas a little earlier. At primary level, the most common formative assessment approaches are quizzes, most frequently used by 90% of respondents as a formative assessment strategy. Other key approaches are class discussions at 88.5%, group projects at 86%, and student interviews at 80%. From ages 11 to 15, and then through from 16 to 19, a similar picture was painted with quizzes, group projects, class discussions, and interviews with students, most common as the formative assessment strategy. All right. In terms of new forms of assessment then, so audio and visual recordings have become common practice for teachers to engage in assessment with students at all age brackets. Online tests and interviews have been regularly used for summative assessment strategies too, especially during lockdowns. Actually, exam.net was mentioned here as being a regularly used platform. For students aged 5 to 10, digital platforms have been used more frequently to present work and support assessment. And just to give you an example of some of the platforms that were most regularly used, we heard about Google Classroom, Seesaw, Padlet, Kahoot, Flipgrid, and Nearpod. And those are just some of the platforms that were highlighted. In the primary age bracket, diagnostic testing through digital recordings, online writing assessments, and online entry level tests were mentioned as well. 94% of the international schools serving 11 to 15-year-olds introduced formative assessment strategies for students through online solutions, and study projects were common here. So again, some of the key platforms mentioned were Screencastify, Khan Academy, IXL, and Google Jamboard. And then the adoption of collaborative digital projects, digital presentations, evidence-based teacher assessment, problem-based learning, and online breakout rooms were suggested as more frequently used for assessment for 16 to 19-year-olds. So those are some of the new forms of assessment and some of the platforms that are being used currently. All right, so as a result of COVID, it's no surprise we're moving towards digitization for assessment. As you can see on the screen there, 73% of international schools in our survey said they use digital platforms as part of their internal assessment. You'll see from the graph on this slide that the nature of assessment transforms between age groups, with external exams increasing the need to assess by summative methods. Something we've talked about in the report, but should entry requirements for universities and a drive towards gradings change, these charts will likely look very different in the future. Of the international schools we spoke with, 2 of the schools rated their in-house developed learning management system as sufficient for their needs, and all of the other schools responded saying that their proprietary brands were what they needed for a product. They couldn't really look at using an independent bespoke piece developed in-house. And some of those proprietary brands were Google Classrooms, ManageBack, which is often combined with Turnitin, and Microsoft Teams. So 46% of all international schools research said that digitizing academic records at an earlier stage would improve a student's pathway from secondary to tertiary education. Another 48% of those researched were undecided, and only 6% of international schools didn't believe digital academic records would improve student pathways into higher education. Some international schools also recognize the potential of lifelong digital academic passports through blockchain. So on the subject of digital academic passports, one respondent summed up the comments of several, and you can read it on the slide, but I'll read it out anyway. So it will save time, effort, and reduce stress for getting all documentation physically collected, endorsed, sent, received, and easier to authenticate and use for applying to degrees, jobs, and hiring. Others saw a value for more effectively supporting pathways, one saying, easy access of data and previous performance might help counsellors in supporting students better with their careers and university choices, or choices of programs as well. So, this is clearly an area of interest and a discussion topic for schools, examination boards, and of course, universities moving forward. ISC Research provides free access to valuable resources, showing good practice within the international schools community and the broader K-12 schools market. These resources include the light subscription to ISC Insight, providing local data to inform your plans, confirm your strategy, or adjust it to stay competitive in your local market. We also publish free resources, including white papers and a selection of free specialist reports, and these are accessible via ISC Insight on our website. So most recent free reports include our Wellbeing in International Schools report, Teaching and Learning in International Schools, the growing demand for international schools within a mid-market fee point, the Pathway from International School to Higher Education report, and the International School Student Profile. You're also encouraged to subscribe to International School Leader magazine, a free publication promoting good practice across the international schools community. So we continue to track the market closely for shifts, challenges, good practice, new development, and emerging opportunities. If you're not following ISC Research on LinkedIn, Twitter, or Facebook, make sure you do to ensure you're up to date on all our news and resources as they become available. You can contact me anytime for directions there too. So please feel free to get in touch. So, this has been a very brief intro to our new specialist report, but I hope some of that was helpful in guiding you on those, macro overview points. So I will certainly hand back to you now, Vikas.
Thank you so much, Sam. Just to make sure that everyone understands that there's on the isc4schools.com/T4 link, you'll find a set of reports you'll be able to download. And I didn't realize that the breadth of reports that you actually have available that are quite interesting for teachers. So thank you for that, Sam. And you can go, like I said, you can go to the link that I show over here and take part and actually benefit from that research. And also, please, as ISC Research is a friendly institution, someone that we actually have a huge amount of regard for. Please also go and like their Facebook page. If you've enjoyed listening to Sam's comments, you will, I'm sure, like to follow their content. So thank you for that, Sam. The question that of course, I'm going to ask everyone who's watching some obvious questions that come to my mind, and I'd love to get them in. So, for example, you mentioned a number of these tools that are being used increasingly. The question I want to ask everyone who's watching: what tools do you use to assess what tools and platforms you're actually deploying in your context for assessment? And if you could just let us know that, I think that would be interesting, given what Sam has said. But Sam, you talked about digitization, right? And one of the things you did was mention 73% of international schools use digital platforms as part of their internal assessment. Do you know how they use them?
Yeah, so sure. So there are so many options out there, all doing a variety of different things. We'll hear from the audience in a minute, as to the platforms that they're using. But you've got Google Suite, which is a learning management system. Kahoot is very well used by schools, and most schools will be aware of Kahoot. But I mentioned in the summary I gave at the beginning of the session that quizzes are the most popular form of formative assessment, and Kahoot is certainly a really good example of that. Also you've got Padlet out there that people are using pretty consistently to invoke discussion in group projects. You've got Teams, breakout rooms, which are being used too. So a good few ways international schools are using these digital platforms, though, in particular, would be firstly to create e-portfolios of progress, which tend to be shared with parents, students, and faculty. They're used as a reflective tool to aid children in transitioning throughout their education life cycle, and hopefully in the future into university as well. They're used to support self-assessment and to aid formative feedback, which is more interactive for students. Platforms are being used as tools to map data in order to assess individuals based on a wider set of data points. Essentially, if we break it down, these platforms are designed to be live, fluid, time-saving, easy to use, and engaging. But one last point I want to make on that, Vikas, is student engagement features were only mentioned as a key benefit by about 20% of respondents. which personally I would have thought would have acted as one of the much higher key benefits. Perhaps this will change in the future, but the research indicates the use of these platforms is really led by productivity and administration tasks, so not so much surrounding student usage. So, as I say, I found that quite enlightening.
The question that really I should have asked before this was actually, I think I missed a step in asking you this question, which was, what do you see as the key assessment challenges schools are tackling at this time? And given everything we've gone through over the last 2-3 years, what are the salient things that come through?
Yeah, so I think there are short-term focuses, and then there are those medium to long-term focuses. But if we start by looking at some of those short-term focuses, I think a lot of that revolves around the impact of lost learning. So if I give you some examples based on examination year groups, I think there's been changes in examination components. Some papers have been removed or modified. Schools have additional pressures surrounding predicted grades, grade distribution, and providing alternative non-examination routes. Then there's university admission changes and the validity of leaving certificates, with some countries having changed their requirements for overseas curricular qualifications, making access far more difficult for some students studying overseas. There are fluctuating grade boundaries and substantial delays in launching new syllabi as well, which is, of course, set people back, and content is yet to be updated. So things have been put on hold to a point. So post some of the immediate pressing issues facing schools, we have those kind of wider issues, longer term. And one of those I describe as inequality across the market, which we talk about a bit in our report. So while some schools move towards digital practice and develop innovative assessment to support individual learners' needs, there's definitely still hurdles that remain in the way for a good number of schools. And a couple of those I just point out would be access to technology and quality digital infrastructure and funding. In particular, there are a lot of schools that just can't afford it, or they're in a location where they can't have any access to internet. And then there's an acknowledgement that the needs of students are all different as well. So a personalization is needed, whilst traditional models currently being used to like the majority rather than those outlying minorities. So those, I would suggest, would be the assessment changes and challenges that we're seeing, Vikas.
And so Alejandra asked this question. She says, although formative assessment is essential, you do need summative, but we need to change how we set them up so as to give students equal opportunities to show comprehension. Do you have a response to that?
Yeah, I think summative assessment is essential for as long as we have universities who require fixed grading to attend university, and for as long as we have league tables and parental bodies who require set examinations results and what have you. There are talks of some universities now going down a different path and not requiring the traditional grades associated with with getting into university. So that would be my take on it. I think I certainly think summative for the time being is absolutely essential.
And so Kavita says, her school is working on a platform that auto-marks free text responses, and they usually invested in that direction, working with an exam board also as part of a pilot. I think that's quite fascinating, actually.
That's really fascinating, yeah.
She said she feels digital assessments definitely have a space in formative assessments in the short term, many advantages in doing this. Too much to discuss here in the form of text.
Yeah, absolutely.
This actually talks to some of the themes that you have raised, actually. Do you have a response to Kavita?
No, only that I agree with everything she said. So I think we're on the same wavelength, Kavita.
Okay, so Karen Wallstra says, the tools are one thing. It is the questions that are asked that are important. Did the report ask about the type of questions being asked? If yes, were the questions mainly knowledge and recall, or did they go into higher order thinking?
Yeah, I think Karen's absolutely right. Essentially these are these online platforms are tools, and we do need to pay careful attention to the questions we're asking in order to mine data and to gather relevant information. So yeah, I think we do touch upon that subject a bit. We break it down into 3 sections. So we have the Survey Monkey we sent out, which collected a whole bunch of information from a whole heap of different people. Then we have specific responses from key schools, and then we also have key experts in the market who often refer to not just using these platforms, but deeper underlying questioning behind them as well. So yeah, there is elements of that touched upon in the report.
And so Alexandra says a big question for him is, how are all digital tools affecting improved outcomes or results? Is there an upward trend in exam performance?
I think that is an interesting question, Alexander. I think that so with digital platforms, you can be more interactive. They're more live. Students, teachers, and parents all have access. So the process is triangulated as well, and teachers have to be on their game and update it consistently. And there's AI as well. So it's really 24 hours rather than just the period in which a student's at school. So yeah, it's much more live. They're easier to use. They're more dynamic. Kids can self-assess. So from my perspective, I think they're a fantastic tool, and they should benefit schools in seeing upward trends in exam performance.
Vanessa says platforms are very accessible, but the data used to access by schools, teachers, and learners make it a very expensive exercise in a country where connectivity comes at a huge cost. What does your research tell us about that?
Yeah, in the report we have one school leader in particular who says, it's all well and good, but we need time, money, and internet access, and so touches upon the difficulties in them as a school trying to move forward with assessment online through different platforms. So I completely agree with Vanessa, in that regard.
So Karen, who's a big cheese in South Africa, and I'm sure she'll smile when I call her that. She says, do you use a blended approach of tools when assessing? I think that's a question for someone else that's been commenting. But Sam, do you have a comment on that?
For me, I'm not a teacher, so I don't run a school, but yeah, I don't really have an update on that one, to be honest, because I think that's perhaps for someone else who's working in a school.
So I wanted to ask you this final question, which is, your research shows a large proportion of schools are willing to leverage technology to support student pathways to tertiary education. What do you think may be needed to get there?
Yeah, so firstly, I think a lot of training and exposure is needed in order to normalise the use of key technologies surrounding student digital portfolios. Educators need access to relevant resources and training to support learners. I think EdTech suppliers are going to need to play a role in meeting educators' needs and guiding them, on the usage of their platforms. And then CPD providers, after that will be instrumental here too in upskilling faculties. I think schools and key stakeholders really need to reach a position of trust when they're looking at these products, especially when they're built on blockchain. Many, I myself have used or been a key or a reader up on blockchain technology for a while, and whenever I've had a conversation with people, there tends to be quite a bit of pushback. So from my perspective, I think it's really interesting that blockchain is part of the conversation. People are kind of warming to the technology and looking at how they can use it in the transition from school to higher education with regards to qualifications. I think one radical change could be when universities start asking for technological support in the migration from K-12 to tertiary. At this point, schools will likely need to change their process. I think, we haven't touched upon it really, but examinations boards really need to play a role here too. I don't think this is going to be a kind of a light switch moment where, things just change overnight. I think there's going to need to be a gradual process where initially schools start to interact with new technologies and begin to understand and recognize the benefits. And if I were to point out the benefits, I'd say, streamlining the application process, time saving, equitability, placing ownership in the hands of student, centralization, security, and the inability to manipulate grades. So things I've mentioned here are some of the things we need to do to get to a place where more schools are leveraging tech, Vikas.
And so I end with a comment that's been placed that chimes with what you just said from a friend called Karen. Digital tools are wonderful where there are learning pathways that personalize the learning for learners. The potential of these tools with AI into the future will be exciting to see. Sam, your comments so far have been fantastic and really shed a light on the subject. Again, for one final time, I tell everyone that there's a toolkit that you've created for teachers, which includes a report and other resources. You can go to your website, iscforschools.com/T4, and download that. You can also like ISC Research's Facebook page. If you've enjoyed listening to Sam, I'm sure there'll be plenty more videos with him there.
You can like it even if you haven't enjoyed listening to me as well. It's not one of them.
All news is good news, as they say. But thank you so much, Sam, for taking part in this conversation. Do you have a final parting kind of conclusion that you wish to offer teachers that are watching from around the world?
Yeah, I mean, if I was talking about a kind of a conclusion, I'd say, I think, firstly, I think the report that we've put together really offers great advice for educators and school leaders. We discussed positive impacts on communities where assessment practice has been changed. There's some great insights in the report. So like from Dr. Mary Richardson from UCL and so on. So that's a really interesting part of the report to read. Obviously you've got the survey results in there as well, which is super important. And then conclusions as well. I just wanted to point out one thing. We also have a webinar running next week on Wednesday, on 15th March. So if you want to check out some of the people who have been involved in the research in this report, then go to our website and you'll be able to see, you'll be able to find out more details for that webinar. So yeah, other than that, Vikas, I hopefully have given a bit of an insight into the report.
Thank you so much, Sam. And I ask everyone to also remember that on the 25th and 26th of March, we have the forthcoming Teacher Tech Summit, which is being co-hosted by the World Bank and Owl Ventures and T4. I know teachers are very much looking forward to the opportunity of learning about what's happening around the world with regards to the use of tech, and also learn how to incorporate technology in their practice. And you can register at teachertechnologysummit.org. And we look forward to seeing you then. Until our next opportunity, friends, I thank you for your time today, and I thank Sam and ISC Research for the excellent research that they've shown today. Please join me in thanking Sam, and I look forward to the next opportunity.
It's been a pleasure.